Welcome back. A lot of interesting economic news and reviews this past week. Let's talk about it with Kirk Penho from Crain's Detroit Business back with us again, and from the Detroit News columnist Daniel House. Kirk, I want to start with you because you and Bill Shea wrote extensively about District Detroit a couple of months ago. Then we see it spilled out in a national forum, but very much in keeping with what you guys found when you were looking down there. And I guess the question becomes, do we just need to be patient with what was promised, or are these promises not being kept when we look at all? We thought this was going to be not a stadium, but a neighborhood that happened to have a stadium in it.
Right. So the original plan that's coming up upon its 5-year unveiling anniversary in July was originally slated to be 45 to 50 blocks of mixed-use development that was going to sprout up concurrently over the course of several years. Right. Obviously, that has not happened. There's really no way to debate that. So the question becomes, what happens now? Is there a mechanism by which the city can start holding them accountable? Does more public pressure add to sort of the urgency behind getting some of these projects out of the ground or completed? There has been a little bit of work done on some of these historic buildings so far, but certainly not with the speed with which the Illiches were promising back in July of 2014.
These neighborhoods had names given to them even and I think that's why a lot of people, me included, thought that this is really bigger than a stadium. Daniel, you did a commentary that ran yesterday on Michigan radio, and you're taking the Illiches to task a bit too.
Well, I think that this makes development in Detroit more difficult for everyone. Whether you're Ford Motor Company and the train station, Dan Gilbert, some of his big projects, Fiat Chrysler, they're all having to deal with neighborhood groups under the guise of the community benefit agreements. And that's fine, but I think there's a skepticism that is injected into the process because people look back and say, well, but the Illiches didn't do this, they didn't do that, and that makes it harder and a heavier lift for everybody. And frankly, this can be solved by one entity, and that is the Illich organization. They know why they haven't done certain things, and I think also, finally, I do think that there's real frustration in the business community and in City Hall that, to some ways, that the Illich organization has played them for chumps.
Interesting, Kirk. There were some people saying this past week, look, you can't just expect this all to be on the Illiches. Other people needed to the idea was that they would sort of get in on this, and yet the Illiches own most of the footprint. So it is kind of hard for somebody else to make something happen, especially where these. It kind of breaks my heart when I drive down Cass and I see a $45 fee for a parking lot that's been put in there.
Well, so it's also important to note that they were able to bring in, at least initially about 2 years ago, a couple different, I guess you can call them partner developers. One of them that was responsible for probably 80% of the units that were unrolled in the first phase of the residential launch, sort of unceremoniously bowed out about a year ago due to a couple different factors, including one of which is just sort of what's perceived as a micromanagement on part of the Illich organization in order to get some of these things done. So it's not that there aren't groups that weren't initially willing to work with the Illiches. It's that based on what we've reported, they've been driven out.
Yeah, you saw the story. The Illiches seemed to think it was a hit job. Was it a fair representation of what's going on? Showing pictures of what's going on in the schools and in some of the neighborhoods is maybe.
Well, I think you got to be careful about linking it to bankruptcies and all sorts of other things. Because and a lot of times people come in and they just kind of look at the picture and they put it all together and put 2 and 2 together and get 7. That's not necessarily the way it happened. But I think it's important to note in all of this context is the Illiches were investing in Detroit before it was cool.
Absolutely.
They were the trailblazers, really.
Sitting there all alone for a long time. Yes.
Exactly right. And this was kind of going to be the capstone.
But there's a thing about expectation management. Don't show me something that don't show me lobster if I'm going to have a hamburger. And that's that.
Do what you say you're going to do.
What you're going to say, yes. Let's talk about the other big news of the Waymo and Rivia, both different pieces of the same kind of puzzle, though. Both felt to me to be really big pieces of news for a city that still wants to stay the mobility capital.
Yeah, if you got a $500 million investment into Rivian and then another 10+ million investment into the actual city of Detroit by Waymo, that's obviously good news. There's a lot of movement on part of the AV and EV front, and that's only spurring more momentum.
The symbolism here cannot be overstated. Waymo, which is of course the Google self-driving unit, is going to be assembling product in the city of Detroit. They originally were going to be out in Wixom, as my colleague Nolan Finley reported on Friday. But Dan Gilbert got involved, sent a note to John Krafchick, who he met actually here a couple years ago, said, hold off. They
gave us a week.
They went to their friends at American Axle, one thing after another. They're coming to Detroit. It's huge. The Rivian deal is also huge. This has been the hottest electric vehicle company on the auto show circuit in the past year, doing a truck and an SUV sometime next year. What's really interesting, very mature leadership, and they understand that to do what they need to do, they need the help of the traditional auto industry.
I've only got about 30, 40 seconds left. How worried should we be about what's going on in Eastern Market these days? We watched the Russell Street Deli, which is an institution there, announced last week that they're getting kicked out. And I've heard, after the Nelsons came in and took over a lot of it, we've heard a lot of people worried that it won't be able to keep its character.
There's a lot of concern about that. That's certainly true. There's a back and forth, obviously, between the tenant and the landlord here, and that's something that we don't often get sort of this insider view of, which a lot of the media did, because we were provided a 30-minute recording of a meeting between the landlord and the tenant, which the tenant obviously knew he was being recorded.
Right.
So we had that working for us in the media, but how it actually plays out for the broader Eastern Market, the Nelsons say that they want to keep the identity of the market, but we'll see.
Let's hope. Yeah, got to get to a break. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.